tozifunye naye nga wazikozesa otandika okwebuzaabuza tomulinda kale kusanga otandika okwebuzaabuza toyagala munyega you're creating a bond otandika ocreating a bond nga munyumyamu mweyagala but you don't want to mention about the money nga sente olya wozoogerako waliwo ekijja okukyankalanamuko so byebintu ebimu ebyeretera mu mabanja omanye ebbanja ddungi ng'olirya oba ng'olikozesa naye bwe bituuka mu lisasula abantu abamu beewalana omuntu n'omuwola emitwalo 10 bwe mutuuka mu mubanja n'atandika okufuuka mulabewo n'atandika okwewala mu prosesi y'okuwalana omanyi omuntu ayinza obba akuwalana just lwa sente z'omubanja ng'alaba nti buli bwemuteekako pressure ofuuka ekizibu gy'ali kyokka nga ku ssente zo kwofuukidde ekizibu so mu mbeera eyo yennyini mwe njagala otandikira ku story eno where public debt has grew by 4.47 trillion. In details that were contained in the monetary policy report for the period ended August, the Bank of Uganda said that the stock of public debt had grown from 65.83 trillion, roughly 17.96 billion US dollars, that was of June 2020, to 70.3 trillion. Now we're looking at the growth of the public, we're looking at the growth of the public debt, growing by 4.47 trillion. That is from 65.83 trillion Ugandan shillings by June 2020 to 70.3 trillion. That is the stock in regards to public demand. In the details that were actually contained in a monetary policy report for the period that was ended in August, the Bank of Uganda said that the stock of public debt, which grew from 65 to 83 to 70.3 trillion, registered an increase of 4.47 trillion in just 1 year. So that is the period from 2020 to August 2021. Christine Biringiro, the programs manager at the Uganda Debt Network, says borrowing for common good is prudent and expressed concern over poor management of borrowed funds. Now, according to Madame Christine Biringiro, who is the project manager, who is the programs manager at the Uganda Debt Network, says it is wise to borrow because even businesses do borrow. Even people borrow. I mean, by the way, it is wise when you're going to borrow for a common good. She clearly said, you will excuse me, no business owner, and you borrow for a good cause. It is quite helpful to you as a person. It is giving you room to send as an organized consign good use, because in most cases why businesses borrow is because many of them want to sustain some of the things. We're going to recording the losses nyingi nyonoga why kaso kanewole wo muntu anyambeko mu bino na bino ogenda tunula nti sente zo ebisente bisingo nzo bango osubira sente okuva business nezigana nogamba for me to actually get more, let me borrow some money and invest into the business. Once the money I've borrowed helps me regain my profits in the business, I'll pay off that. Because katosoka nokola, and with time as you're working, you will end up seeing that buli wokolo jabo yongera mna amanyo rensonga oine banje eryokubitinga. But the problem, according to Christine Biringiro, the program manager at the Uganda Debt Network, she comes out and expresses concern over the poor management of borrowed funds. Now, public debt has been growing against a weak position of revenue performance. While during the 2021-2022 financial year is expected to underperform by a 1.836 trillion due to resurgence in COVID-19 cases and related disruptions such as lockdown of the economy, it is still in an alarming state, to the fact that the public debt already grew by a 4.47 trillion Ugandan shillings. The increase, according to the Bank of Uganda, was during the period, and what pushed the nominal debt ratio to gross domestic product to 46.3% up from 41% by June 2020. I just want us to look at these figures clearly. I want us to focus and see what it does mean to the economy of Uganda and what it means to the public debt rising from that. Uganda's public debt has been growing rapidly from 35.3% as of June 2019. Those are 2 years back, to the current levels, and it's projected to grow further, if you'll excuse me, and is expected to grow further to 51.9% by the end of the 2021-2022 financial year. And experts are saying to curb this debt stress, government should implement proper utilization of borrowed funds, as well as comprehensive monitoring and reducing on expenditures. Let us first break this down a little bit in some of these minutes. The government borrows. The question is, there's always improper, or there's always misallocation of these funds. These funds are not utilized in the way they're supposed to be utilized. When someone borrows this amount of money, what we do expect is there has to be turned. Something has to be provided on board. Experts are clearly coming out and saying to curb the debt stress, government should properly utilize by implementing a basis on how the borrowed funds are going to be used, and the government should monitor and reduce on the expenditures, because clearly the only problem there is that borrowing the public funds and wrongly using them. I don't know if you're getting the picture here. And wrongly using them, because it is not giving us, it is not showing us the reason as to why we keep on borrowing at the end of the day. The same reason as to why when the government is borrowing from international organizations, if I am to say, you will find out that we'll borrow a number of millions of money and we set on course where the money is going to be allocated. But if we are to start looking into how the money has been spent or how the expenditures have been ongoing, you will agree with me that absolutely no one has benefited from it. It is those in the government that are taking these funds and pushing them into their own businesses. Sad, but quite true. Very unfortunate, but still prevailing. And one will ask, why is it so? Because as we are still into this situation, the more we borrow, we're finding a problem, because the problem here is when you borrow money and it's misused, there is always going to be a problem when it comes to paying it back. Why? It did not meet the goals that were aligned for it. As in, you've borrowed the money to, let me say, you want to input into a city, like the government wants to input into a project, and the project is still in its initial stages, and the funds are swindled away by the people in power, maybe the policy makers in that regard. If we were to throw back and see, government recently acquired a $1 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund that is expected to support post-COVID-19 recovery and lend support to implementation of the third National Development Plan, which is also going to lead us into the financial year 2022-2023. But we're still looking at it and we want sente zako zisebwa bulungi, because olaba government buli weyewola kidda erife ne generations ezijja are the ones that are going to be in that debt okusasula sente ezo ezitaakozesebwa bulungi. Tiwaliwo omuntu yazikwata naziteeka mu nsawo ye, muziteeka mu nsawo for their own benefit. And we're seeing the things happening. People don't know what is happening on ground, but they literally know that money is coming in. And when money comes in, or the funding comes into the situation, ojja kwekanga nti ebintu ebimu bitutuukako tetumanya. Naye sente bwe zivaayo, like gavumenti eyinza okwewola, tumanya nti eyeewoze. Naye bwe batandika ozikozesa tomanya wa we ziraze. Wekanga projects ze bayogerako okutandika tezitandise, and leaving bigger questions nti so we borrowed $1 billion US. How did we use it? And at the end of the day we shall hear the stories like every Ugandan has a debt of 1.5 million. And people will be like, wait a minute. Some people don't even earn 1.5 million on a salary, a basis. Neither do even some business owners have profits of 1.5 million. Omuntu n'ennyumba gy'asulamu ajja kugamba teweza mitwalo 5 ate omugamba alina ebbanja lya $1.1 ng'ate ye tannalaba nawa sente bwe zimugasiza kuba yeesasulira rent, asasula bills, asasula omusolo. So clearly you could see where the government is still having some of those loopholes that they need to cover up in situations. As the public debt has been growing rapidly from 35.3% by June 2019 to the current levels, and is projected to grow further to 51.9% by the end of the 2021-2022 financial year. Speaking to Smart24, Christine Biringiro, a program manager at the Uganda Debt Network, says this is alarming and urging the government to go for prudent debts and proper utilization of borrowed funds. Let's first have a look at what Madam Christine Biringiro has to say in regards to the public demand and the public debt that has grown by 4.47 million %, as Pedison Mumbere reports.
The stock of public debt has increased to 70.3 trillion, indicating a growth of 22.5% as of June 2021. In details contained in the Monetary Policy Report for the period ended August, Bank of Uganda said the stock of public debt had grown from 65.83 trillion as of June 2020 to 70.3 trillion, which represents an increase of 4.47 trillion in just 1 year. Christine Biringiro, the program's manager to Uganda Debt Network, says borrowing for a common good is prudent. She, however, expressed concern over the poor management of the borrowed funds.
While the debt, as indicated by now Bank of Uganda, has grown to 70.3 trillion, which indicates a 22% increase, of course, from 66 trillion, we are concerned as UDN, as civil society, and there are basically reasons. It has not just happened, yeah. We believe this has been a long way coming. For example, you'll know that as a country, we have moved more towards non-concessional borrowing as opposed to concessional borrowing. Concessional from the multilateral institutions, the World Banks, the IMFs, under the International Development Association window. And so between, for example, between 2016-17 and 2019-20, we see that concessional borrowing has moved from 74% to 60%. And these are loans which are at least a bit cheaper. They have a grant element of about 35% onwards. The payback time is over a long period of time, but we also know that they usually target social sectors, yeah, health, education, and so because government needs to finance its investment, especially in infrastructure, we are looking. Government needed, huge sums of money to address this, and so that's why we had to go for non-concessional borrowing, non-concessional and commercial borrowing from the Chinas, the Exim banks, and so this has increased over the same period, 2016 to 20, in just 4 years, from 11% to 19%, yeah, 19.9% actually. So the problem with these commercial loans or non-concessional borrowing is that, one, it is usually more expensive because they will give you all the money, huge sums that you need to finance your investments. And two, the payback time is usually within a short period of time. Yeah, grant element is almost not there.
Public debt has been growing against a weak position of the revenue performance, which during the financial year 2021-2022 is expected to underperform by 1.836 trillion due to resurgence in COVID-19 cases and related disruptions, such as locking down of the economy.
What should we do? Interestingly, government has come out. Yeah, I remember during the budget speech, the minister clearly mentioned that, for example, that domestic borrowing will have to reduce. They pledged that they will do more of borrowing using treasury bills and not using treasury bonds, which are long term, and not treasury bills, which mature in such a short time. Even with that, which is welcome, of course, we applaud that, but our worry is that even if government wanted to borrow using the treasury bonds and not treasury bills or any other domestically, we don't see many other options available to government, domestically, for them to be able to do that. So ultimately, if they are faced with another hardship and they need finances urgently, there is a possibility that they'll still go for borrowing short term as well. So, but that is welcome, the pledge to borrow using long-term instruments. We also saw government.
The increase, Bank of Uganda said, had during the period pushed the normal debt ratio to gross domestic product to 46.3%, up from 41% by June 2000. Uganda's public debt has been growing from 35.3% by June 2019 to the current levels and is expected to grow further to 51.9% by the end of the financial year 2021-2022. Experts say that to curb this debt stress, government should implement proper utilization of the borrowed funds, as well as implementing a comprehensive monitoring and reducing on its expenditures.
Follow the laws as they are, make sure that you do ample monitoring of some of these projects, we feel that, maybe we can get there, but mainly is managing these projects, the loan projects, if we were to manage them properly, and of course reduce the consumptive expenditures, and focus on productive. Because we see, for example, I'll always talk about parliament. The size of our parliament in this economy of ours is not sustainable really, because our debt has now grown to this. But we have given each MP 200 million to purchase a car. And remember, there are about 527 MPs that we have. It is good government is undertaking, or rather in the process of merging agencies and authorities, which is a welcome move to help us save some monies. But we also call upon government to remove these taxes, especially for the investors, because these ones who are exempted from paying tax and then they benefit in all ways, while the Ugandans, maybe the Ugandan traders, the other day Kasita were almost striking because they had slapped a tax on textiles. For each kilogram of textile, we feel some of these taxes are unfair.
According to data from the central bank, debt service to domestic revenue ratio has been steadily rising, growing to 24.6% by June, up from 22.4% and 21.7% in June 2019 and June 2020, respectively. Government recently required a $1 billion US loan from the International Monetary Fund that is expected to support post-COVID-19 recovery and lend support to implementation of the third National Development Plan. Benson Mumbere, Smart 24.
Government recently acquired a $1 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund, and that is expected to support COVID-19 recovery and lead support to implementation of the third National Development Plan. If you could all know, a $1 billion loan. How I wish the money goes to the allocated places and the government just clearly lays on board procedures to follow up, and this money becomes of great importance before we even apply for another loan, because I'm seeing it happening anytime soon. But let's put the $1 billion into use, and clearly it's going to give us, it will give us a picture of how the country is surviving and how the country will definitely survive, with the fact that we have an increase in the public debt. Speaking of 4.47 trillion growing in just a period of 1 year, that is the period of June 2020 to August 2021, from 65.83 trillion Ugandan shillings to 70. But the question will still be from my own view and from my own perspective. How far does the benefit from the loans? If at all the time we have these loans, we have cases of people coming out and complaining that the government gets these loans, but the government does not use the loans profitably, or the loans are not allocated to the places we want them to be. The funds are always swindled, the funds are always mishandled. Because what we generally think and generally look at in cases of funds and allocation of funds is we are looking at the pictures. Take for example, what do people gain from managing, what do people actually gain from a government getting $1 billion and they are suffering at the expense? With the government saying we are looking at the idea of surviving in the COVID-19, we have the third wave coming through. With this $1 billion will be great of help. I'm not throwing shade to any member of the government. I'm simply putting out my opinion in this regard. Where does this leave Ugandans, and how far are we going to borrow huge amounts of money? Because according to reports, the debt has increased by 4.47 trillion Ugandan shillings in a situation that is quite alarming. And most of us will still be questioning the government to help us understand. Tufuniramu wa yegwo mna Uganda aliye alaba ofuniramu wamanyi bino bintu this is logical. Twagala tusoke tubere mu situation nga buli omu yebuuza nfuniramu wa ofuniramu wa gwe ng'omuntu. But clearly we shall live at this particular situation, and we shall definitely be following up on that situation. But what you need to know is that the stock of public debt did increase to 70.3 trillion, indicating a growth of 22.5% as of June 2021, as we were heading into the financial year 2021-2022. We shall still wait and see the reports for the upcoming 2022-2023 financial year. Let's take a short break. I return with more of the business stories. Keep it S&B.